Hello and welcome to Can I Ask You a Personal Question with Will and Dan. This week Will and Dan speak to Jim Mellon, an investment billionaire who became a well-known Brexiteer around the 2016 EU referendum. Nowadays his focus is very much on business, and today he speaks to Dan and Will about his investments in the anti-aging and plant-based meat sectors. If you're enjoying our podcast, please let us know by leaving a review and a 5-star rating. Here's the podcast. Enjoy!
Who is Jim? Tell me more.
He's a billionaire.
Oh, wow. Tell me nothing more.
Yeah. He is an investor mainly. He started off in fund management, made a lot of money in Russia actually at the time of privatization, which I know is an area of interest for you.
Absolutely.
And yeah, now he's done lots of successful investments, and now he's a very rich man.
Wow. We've spoken to a few investors now, haven't we?
Yeah.
He describes himself as a visionary entrepreneur with a flair for identifying emerging global trends.
He's quite caught up in all of the Brexit drama as well. He's a good friend of Aaron Banks. Allegedly, he introduced Aaron Banks to Nigel Farage.
So he is what you might call a Brexiteer, would you say?
Yeah, although I think he's been described as a Brexit bad boy. He's got some really interesting investments actually. One of his main businesses at the moment is called Juvenescence, and that's got nothing to do with your co-founder Juverne. It's actually about a company that wants to extend people's lives.
Wow, that sounds fun.
That'd be pretty interesting to talk about that. Hi, Jim.
Hi, who's that?
Hey, it's Will here.
How are you?
Going on your Wikipedia page, you've you had quite a, I'd say, privileged upbringing. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, compared to most people, I think that's true. I was the son. Are we starting now? Are we all?
Yeah.
Right. I am the son of a diplomat who's very much with us. And we traveled around a lot. And in those days, being in the diplomatic service was much more impressive perhaps than it is today, because, you had very nice houses and, everything was laid on for you. But on the other side of it, you have to go to boarding school because obviously you're moving around, and you have to go back to the UK for schooling. So I did that, and then I went to university in England. And from that moment onwards, apart from one very brief 3 or 4 month session in London, I've never worked in the UK.
Did you like boarding school?
No.
Why not?
My boarding school, which is called Ampleforth College, is now a notorious place because Gavin Williamson was trying to shut it down, maybe unfairly, but it is the Catholic sort of premier boarding school, and my father's a very Catholic person, so we all had to go to Catholic schools. I was only there for 4 years. I didn't like it at all, and I didn't like it not because of the apparent abuse that was going on there, because I didn't notice that, but because you were forced to do sports in cold weather conditions all the time. Not my bag. And but I loved university. That was a different kettle of fish. Yeah.
And so you went to Oxford, and what did you study?
PPE. So by rights I should be in politics, right? So but I'm not.
Yeah.
And
but you kind of dabbled. I suppose you kind of dabbled a bit with political donations. You've done it through that route.
Yeah, they're not very big political donations compared to the donations I've made to other stuff, but I will never make political donations again. I mean, I honestly feel that, I always take an economic and nuanced view of things, but the vitriol and hatred that was generated around the referendum is something I never, ever want to experience again, and never want to be part of. I think it's a sad reflection on the reality of social media, and also the bitterness and twistedness of a lot of people who take a very strident position on either side of any argument. It's not something I'm interested in at all.
Really? Wow. Is that still going on for you?
No. Basically, when I was linked totally and falsely to sort of purported Russian financing of the referendum, I engaged expensive lawyers, and every single person who made those allegations has had to apologize, and will, if they ever make them again, I will absolutely sue their asses off.
What do you think it was about that topic compared to other political topics that excited so much of an emotive response?
It's a very good question. I wonder if it's just that they all need a topic to focus on. I mean, at the moment, it's about whether we should be in lockdown on COVID-19. I think Brexit has almost gone off the agenda, hasn't it? You get the same thing in America. And I would imagine that some of it is to do with the perceived and actual inequalities in society. But the reality is that the people who voted for Brexit were the poorer people in society, not the richer people. And so you can't really make a judgment. I just think people are spoiling for a fight on a continuing basis. And a lot of it is to do with social media. It's very destructive. And I do hope that they regulate it. I do hope that they tone down the fervor and hatred that it generates, and the loss of lives that it causes, because there are significant suicides associated with hatred on the internet.
Are you on social media?
But I was going to ask the same
thing.
I'm
not on any social media at all. Unless
Were
you
you
consider
previously?
WhatsApp to be social media. Do you consider it to be social media?
I
suppose it's owned by Facebook.
Yeah.
I'm not on Facebook. Oh, it's owned by Facebook. But I
it's
use
not really
WhatsApp just to message my friends, basically. It's very convenient.
Yeah. You should try LinkedIn. It's very good because it's so boring that it's very unaddictive. It's very unaddictive, I find.
Well, I get quite a lot of new business through LinkedIn.
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn's fine, but it has no relevance to me because I'm not looking for a job. To be quite honest, when I tried to get off LinkedIn, it was the hardest thing I could ever do. They make it really almost impossible to get off it. So I'm not on social media. I was on Twitter, and I think everyone was on Facebook at some point or another, but Facebook seems to be dying a death, right? So, but Twitter I just find to be absolutely malevolent.
Yeah, I can imagine. I know obviously that
I had several 100,000 followers at one point, and then I just realized that this is, it's a pathway, because you wake up in the middle of the night, look at your Twitter feed, and and I've been sleeping better, and actually my life is better since I have nothing to do with these bozos on both sides of the argument.
But so after you went to Oxford, you then went to work in fund management, and you kind of worked in different locations across the world.
That's correct. So I was lucky to get a job in Hong Kong with a company called GT, which is now LGT, which is a big fund management company owned by Liechtenstein's princely family. And the T of GT, Richard Thornton, was my boss and mentor. And he sent me from Hong Kong to San Francisco. I was there for 4 years, and I was there just at the beginning of the big technology boom. And it was a really remarkable period for me. And we had a fund that was, just grew out of, just hugely successful in terms of performance and also raising money. And that gave me a sort of taste for fund management. And so when Richard was kicked out of GT, I went with him and started another fund management company, and I owned 10% of it. And the reason I'm in this house today, which is a very different house to when I bought it 30 years ago, is because I own 10% of that company. It was bought within 4 years by a German bank, and I got enough money to buy the house and a place in London as well, actually, funny enough. And so...
How old were you then?
I was young. I was maybe 27. And so I kind of lucked out early on that one, because fund management was taking off, especially fund management in emerging markets. And that gave me and my colleagues enough money to start our own business, which is a fund management company that became pretty successful. It morphed into Charlemagne Capital and then Regent Pacific on the side, or the both were sort of divergent, but I was the biggest shareholder in both, and they proved to be successful. And I then had enough money not to need to manage other people's money, so I just managed my own money basically.
What was it like investing in emerging markets back then? Is it very much the same as it is now? I imagine kind of the internet and the increasing access has changed it a little bit, has it?
Oh, I would change it enormously, I would have thought. I don't understand how people can still call South Korea an emerging market when it's got, it's not far off UK GDP per capita. I'm not really sure there are that many emerging markets left, to be quite honest. Maybe less developed should be a better term for it. But no, it was super exciting. We obviously lucked out with Russia, and then the former Eastern Bloc became a big area of interest for us. And I lived in Hong Kong.
I guess when people talk about Russia at that time now and sort of the opening up and the capitalization, it's very fashionable, with spy stories and these kind of things to talk about, there was corruption and backroom deals and that kind of thing. Did you experience it in that way, or was it much like another emerging market to you?
No, that's a good question. Basically, we knew that Russia was dangerous in the sense that, it was physically dangerous. And when we went to Vladivostok, Jane Sutcliffe and myself, because we had no idea where to go in Russia, we went to Vladivostok, which is in the Russian Far East. And of course, we were Far Eastern investors. We saw nothing that we liked. The tour of the city took 20 minutes, and that was going around twice. And so we got on a plane, went to Moscow, and then I think the story is quite well known. We used the savings in the company, principally my money, and bought a whole load of vouchers. But we were not big players. So all the backroom dealing, all the corruption, as you call it, was done by the what became oligarchs. And as I understand it, and I think I'm talking correctly, the first wave of privatization, which is when we got our initial stake, was fairly straightforward. It was when Yeltsin got them to lend him money because the Russian state was crumbling in the later 1990s that these backroom deals were done. And, so the oligarchs that we're familiar with lent money to the Russian state, and in exchange they got big chunks of the profitable companies. But we had no idea what we were investing in. So we used Credit Suisse, and they basically told us that anything with gas at the end of the word or with neft in the word meant that it was probably good because it was oil and gas. And so we ended up, well, that's it. And we ended up with a very good, it was an auction. We ended up with a very good return on that money. And then we set up a fund and the only thing that causes any difficulty was when someone in our company worked out that you could arbitrage the ADRs of Gazprom, which were selling at a very big premium to the Gazprom local shares. And we did a fund which was subscribed in minutes, literally. And then we were told by Russian authorities, and I'm not sure exactly who, that it wouldn't be a good idea to do it. So we didn't do it. We cancelled it. So we've never had anything like Bill Browder or, his sort of experience in Russia.
What's taking up most of your time now? Obviously, Juvenescence gets quite a lot of external attention. Is that one of the companies one of the investments you're most excited about at the moment?
Yeah, I only have really two. I mean, look, obviously we have a big family office and we invest in all sorts of stuff ranging from property to utility stocks. But as far as I'm concerned, the only two things that interest me are absolutely, unless you're a beef farmer, uncontroversial and but very positive for humanity, and have attached to them, since I'm after all an entrepreneur and this interview is about entrepreneurship, the prospect of significant capital appreciation. We're very excited about this company. We raised now about $200 million for the company, it's a company, not a fund, so it doesn't charge any fees or anything like that. And we think this could be a very large category. And our objective is in the next 10 years to add 8 years to human life expectancy. So it's a pretty big ambition.
Where is all of this heading in the longer term? I mean, how far can human life be extended from what you've from your knowledge and what you've seen?
I have no idea. I mean, friends of mine like Aubrey de Grey think that people could live to 300, 400, 500 years. I would never make that assertion because I just don't know. And whether people want to live that long is another matter. But what I would say is that we live in the first cohort on the planet for whom biological manipulation is possible. So we know that the pathways of aging are malleable. We didn't know that 10 or 20 years ago. We know that in every mammalian species, these pathways can be manipulated such that there is an extension of life. We don't know exactly which therapies are going to work, but we do know that some of them will work. And there's not going to be one single pill that you'll take that will keep you alive for another 30 or 40 years. It'll be an iterative process, but ultimately, I think that we will find that life expectancy, which has doubled more or less in the last 120 years, will grow by a substantial amount over the next 30 years, but it will because of biological manipulation and not because of environmental factors, which have been the reasons why we've had a rise in life expectancy thus far. And more importantly, in some ways, people will have a different perception of old age. It won't be sitting in a nursing home dribbling away in your last final years. It will be or being afflicted by Alzheimer's or dementia or some terrible dread disease. It will be, hopefully dying in your sleep through literally old age and exhaustion, rather than because you've got some horrible disease that has taken you away.
Interesting. And I think you're about to start talking about your other main business, which is to do with sustainable food.
Well, not my other main business. These are my interests in business, not my principal source of revenue, which are much more boring. So I got interested in a
position to be able to have both, I suppose, isn't it? To have your main business and then your
it has been 40 years of hard effort, I have to say, and a lot of luck thrown in. I think that the pandemic has shown that the food supply chain, which has changed dramatically since the Second World War, is faulty and causes a lot of problems. And we know that pandemics come out of agricultural malpractice, mostly in the Far East. We know that there is an increasing amount of animal to human disease transmission. We know that 80% of all antibiotics go into farmed animals, and that antibiotic overuse finds its way back into us. We become antibiotic resistant, and if we ever got a bacterial pandemic, God help us, we could be living through the Black Death, which would be a lot worse than what we are experiencing at the moment. $20 trillion of lost economic activity, a few million deaths. We would be looking at complete shutdown of the whole of the world, plus possibly billions of deaths. So we absolutely need to do something about the food supply. Now, intensive farming started slightly before the Second World War, but really got underway. 99% of all farmed animals are intensively farmed in the US, 90% in Europe. That has a massive environmental impact. I'm sure you're familiar with those features of it. Destruction of habitat, the Amazon rainforest being cut down to produce soya beans that then get fed to animals. Very inefficient converters of plant protein into animal protein. Animal cruelty, which is a main motivating factor for me. Emissions, about 20% of all emissions come from animal husbandry. Water use, 15,000 liters of water for 1 kilogram of beef, as an example. Just all sorts of bad things happen as a result of animal farming. The world's population is increasing. The developing countries are getting richer, like India and China. They want to eat as much animal protein as the developed world. it's unsustainable. So something has to be done about it. Now, fortuitously, capitalism and science have come up with solutions. One is plant-based foods. We're all familiar with Beyond Burger, Impossible Burger, Corn, Meatless Farms, etc. And they've been taking off like a rocket, as indeed have alternative milks and alternative dairy products. The vegetarian Sorry?
Are you a vegan or vegetarian?
No, I don't eat meat.
Right.
Yeah, don't eat meat. I do eat fish.
Right. Pescatarian.
Pescatarian, that's the right word for it. And no, we don't eat meat in this house. And apart from the dogs. 6 years.
6 years.
And this will be a very big industry. So meat around the world, just meat, is 1.4 trillion. It's about the size of the Spanish economy. In 10, 15 years' time, about the size of the UK economy. So it's a very big prize for those who can get it right. But also people are producing leather, as an example. And it's there, and it's got commercial contracts already in labs. So we're in a major revolution using biotech techniques to produce materials and food. And Rethink X, it's a London-based think tank, very well thought of, thinks that in 10 years' time, 2030, 50% of the meat eaten in the world will be non-conventional meat. It'll be either plant-based or cell ag meat. So the whole industry will be completely disrupted. And the way you can look at it is that it's on the same trajectory as alternative milk. So both of you will be very familiar with almond milk, soy milk, oat milk, etc. If you'd gone into Starbucks 10 years ago, they didn't really exist. Now most people have those sort of alternative milks. The two largest dairy companies in the United States have gone bust as a result recently. So the days of conventional farming are over, or shortly to be over. It will be a slow process to begin with, and then a very fast process. And it can't come too quickly.
I feel like we could talk about this all day, but we are kind of eating up the time quite quickly. And one thing I must ask you is, so a lot of our audience is entrepreneurs, perhaps at an earlier stage of their career, or people who are considering starting a new business. We wanted to ask you, if you had to boil down a few words of advice to people in that position, what would you say to them?
Well, the three words are curiosity. Be very curious about everything. And then hone in on something that you feel that you might have a personal edge in. Be adaptable. So when we start a new company, we have an idea what it might do, but almost invariably it changes. So don't just be rigid about one, thing. So as an example, if you're, thinking about going into the mask making business now, you might consider the fact that in a year's time, there'll probably be no demand for masks, or will be a much lesser demand than there is today. But the idea that you are thinking about starting something that makes something has put you into the entrepreneurial class just immediately. You're already an entrepreneur. And then the last thing, so we've got curiosity, adaptability, and the last thing is application. There are some people in this world who are absolute geniuses, like Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates, and but they do work very hard. But there are some people for whom things just fall into their lap and they can, they don't really need to work very hard. But most of us have to work really hard. So if you're not prepared to work hard and burn the midnight oil, then don't become an entrepreneur, because it won't work.
So our quick fire questions. The first one we've only asked once before, but I thought it was quite a good one for you given your Juvenescence business, which is, what do you believe happens when we die?
Oh, well, I think that if you've led a good life, you'll go to heaven.
Okay.
Hence my Catholic training.
Training's obviously works well.
So I don't think you become a caterpillar or you become nothing. I actually believe in the concept of God. So, first question.
Okay. The second one is, if you were the Prime Minister for one day and you could achieve one reform or change, what would it be?
Oh, that's a great question. Give me an idea. How would you answer that?
I'm on the other side.
We can tell you
it doesn't
how.
Matter. I'm asking you, how would you answer it? Give me an inspiration for how I should answer.
So Martin Gilbert of Aberdeen Asset Management told us that he would.
He's a friend of mine, by the way.
Great. Well, he said he'd borrow a lot of money.
So it might be
borrowing lots of money, which presumably wouldn't be your advice.
Well, he could borrow on behalf of the government. That's a very different thing.
Yeah.
And I think you'd be right in that respect, because interest rates are all-time lows. The problem is the government's not very good at allocating funds. You know, they're very wasteful and they're not very productive in the way in which they invest it. But maybe if Martin was in charge of it, he'd do a good job. But, okay, so if I was in charge, I would... I'd cut the number of MPs from 630 at the moment down to 100 and pay them 5 times more than they currently get paid, to attract people who actually are not doing politics because it's failed rock stars, you know, alternative, but because they are highly competent and they're worth the money that we would be paying them, which would be a lot more. Okay. Singapore has that view, and they're very successful.
Interesting. Who do you prefer, just in general, Donald Trump or Boris Johnson?
Oh, I don't. Absolutely, Boris Johnson.
Okay.
100%.
Do you prefer Nigel Farage or Aaron Banks?
I don't want to get involved in that conversation.
Okay.
I think they're both nice enough to have a drink with, but I don't want anything to do with their politics ever again. They're drawn like moths to a flame for publicity, and it's not my style.
Okay. Is it true you introduced them?
Sorry, that's a good question. It seems to be an urban myth, but Nigel asked me if I would introduce him to Aaron Banks, because Aaron Banks had been, I think Aaron Banks had been described as a nobody because he gave £100,000 to the Conservative Party, and then he got very upset about it. And Nigel read that and asked if he could be introduced to Aaron Banks, who I knew because of our joint shareholding, not joint shareholding, but individual shareholdings in an Isle of Man based business, which Aaron is no longer part of, by the way.
So you did introduce them?
It wasn't like let me introduce you to. It was at the request of one of them.
Yeah. Okay. Next question now.
Yes. Do you have a favourite historical figure or hero?
No.
Good answer.
Because you're looking forward.
Looking forward.
Because you're looking forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure everyone says Churchill or I don't know what they say, Louis Pasteur or something, but I don't. There's not someone I, sort of read the collected works of and get inspired by.
Okay. And final question: what is your favourite place?
That is a really good question. And being the son of a diplomat and being itinerant and nomadic, I don't actually have a favourite place. But if I was confined to barracks and I had to live in one place, I think it would be the Isle of Man, actually. We were there for 4 months before we came here, and it's really, we like it a lot. It's very peaceful and lots of good walks, and it's beautiful as well. So yeah, most people wouldn't say that, but I think the Isle of Man.
Okay, great. We'll have to visit, won't we, Dan?
Absolutely, yeah.
Always welcome.
That was an interesting interview.
Yeah, he's pretty fun, isn't he?
Yeah, I actually really liked how he was quite liberal with his. That's a good question. There was kind of 5 or 6 moments, and each time I still got that little. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, see, I told you it's impossible. It's impossible to ever get past it. But also, what was quite good about him, despite the fact our PR interviewee told us that when people do that, it's because they've been trained to, as I suspected, to deflect. He kind of went, "That's a great question. I'm going to answer it straight away," and he actually did.
Yeah. I guess it was still a technique because it really made me feel positive.
Yeah,
but a nice technique.
Yeah, wait. When you listen back to the podcast, you'll realise that he didn't answer any of those questions at all. You just think he did. It's like putting a spell on you. Anyway, charming guy. Looking forward to visiting him in the Isle of Man.
Yeah, well done on securing an invitation there.